Hello there, and welcome to Mystic Brick. This will be the very next episode in our Daggerheart campaign, so join me as we follow our intrepid adventurers through the cistern of broken echoes and on into the very depths of the Shalk Chasm. Alright, without any further delay, let's get started. For this episode, I'm going to be building 2 mocks, none of them really revolving around combat, but we will have some environmental factors to contend with, and then some pretty intricate puzzles as well. But anyway, for this first one, I'm going to take 3 16x16 plates and start to layer on top. I'm going to be building a little bit of a rock structure in front, and then there's a big wall that our heroes will have to scale down. So while I am building that, I'm going to read for you what happened directly after we left our heroes last time, as written by our GM. The final descent takes us deeper than any mortal structure should reach, spiraling down through living rock towards depths that feel like the very foundations of this cursed place. Here, 100 feet below the surface, the steps are submerged beneath water that glows with its own sickly luminescence. Not the clean blue-white of moonlight, but the yellow-green of infection, of things that rot in places where the sun has never shone and never will. The spiral staircase descends at a treacherous angle, its steps worn smooth by centuries of seepage and carved barely wide enough for single file. The water deepens as we descend, ankle deep at first, then knee deep, then waist deep, the corrupted liquid growing thicker and more viscous with each step down. Strange shapes drift just beneath the surface, and occasionally something brushes against our legs with the cold touch of dead flesh. But it's the steps themselves that present the greatest danger. Slick with algae and mineral deposits that make them treacherous as ice, each one threatens to send the unwary plunging into the deeper water that pools in the stairway's outer curve. And in those deeper pools, pale shapes with too many limbs wait with infinite patience, drawn by the warmth of living blood. The walls bear marks where countless hands have steadied themselves during descent, but the handprints are wrong. Too many fingers, or too few, or fingers that bend in directions that human joints were never meant to accommodate. Some of the prints still seep, as if the walls remember the pain of every soul who has passed this way. So as we descend this treacherous stairwell, most of us are clinging to Hickory for safety, except for Mush Mush, who is able to transform into an eel and guide us through these tepid and grotesque waters until we are able to find a ledge and all climb up on top of that and acquire some safety. Many strength checks and finesse checks are made during this whole process, and we acquire more stress as we're doing this too. But we manage, and upon our exit of the pool, we discover that there's this light below, and we send Mush Mush down there to retrieve whatever that object is. It turns out to be the resonance stone of Acrelius, which is a very important item, and I detailed that in the last episode. But once we've retrieved that item and gathered ourselves, we step out through this small doorway and out onto a ledge, and this is what we see. The land falls away into a yawning, mist-spewing chasm. Ancient glyphs line the rim, and wind carries voices not our own. The earth ends, not in a cliff, but in a collapse. Fog flows upward like smoke, and the world smells of rot. Copper. Far below, lights flicker like stars in water. Our party stands at the edge of the Shalk Chasm, staring into mist-shrouded depths where ancient lights flicker like drowning stars. Below lies the temple that claimed Everdus and his hunters. Behind us, the screams continue to echo across the swampland, carried on winds that taste of loss and despair. The real horror is just beginning. So this was really the end of the first act, and we picked up right here at the next session. And when we did so, we decided to immediately take some respite before continuing on. We were all pretty beat up at this point. And after a long rest, we awake to something quite disturbing. Jules has disappeared. Her bedroll lies empty, her pack and gear arranged with unusual precision, too precise, perhaps, as if someone else had organized them. Her items are lined up by size, her clothes folded in a way that doesn't match her usual habits. A single piece of paper lies weighted down by a stone on her pillow. Hickory decides to walk up to the note at this point and collects it and then hands it to Lulu, and Lulu reads it. In Jules's handwriting, it says, "The wolves are calling. I have to answer. Don't follow. The temple needs you more than I do. Jay." So we're all quite perturbed by this and don't know really what to make of it. We discover that there are footprints of what appears to be a wolf that lead to the very edge of the Shalk Chasm, and so we were going to descend anyway, but this gives us even more incentive to do so. Okay, so here's our completed mock. I think the wall is looking pretty good. All those vines look good. For the carnivorous flowers, I took the flower buds from the Plum Blossom Botanical Line set. I think they just work really well to represent what I wanted here. And then yeah, I also added those poison claws to make it pop too. As we all stare out across the chasm in the mists that enshroud any traverse, Hickory and Appetent devise a method by which they might attempt to provide us a way down. Appetent gives Hickory his Vajra and suggests that Hickory fire his scorpion out into the mist in the hope that we might connect with some sort of rock structure or solid structure beyond. So Hickory does this, but unfortunately the projectile connects with nothing at all and just drops straight down into the mist. Hickory feels a tugging on the end of that rope and starts to be dragged forward toward the edge. Appetent, in a mad act of courage, jumps onto the rope and slides down it in order to confront whatever is below. Of course, this only pulls Hickory closer to the edge, and suddenly we are faced with impending tragedy. Lulu attempts to desperately cling to Hickory before he goes over, but she is simply not strong enough, and it is clear that she will be going right over that edge with him. Mush Mush, anticipating the impending doom, transforms himself into a spider and is then able to web both Hickory and Lulu to the wall, securing them safely above the chasm. Unfortunately, as this happens, Lulu is squashed behind Hickory and takes some damage. Hickory then attempts to dislocate his legs and allow Lulu some room to maneuver. This is something he's able to do. But unfortunately, those legs are still pretty well enwebbed, and as Lulu struggles to get out, she actually ends up taking more damage because the legs spring back into her and injure her more. So at this point, feeling quite frustrated, she decides to take matters into her own hands and sets the web on fire in an attempt to free herself. So she's able to achieve this successfully, but unfortunately Hickory takes some collateral damage, and then the web disappears entirely without anything to prevent Hickory's torso from flying over the edge. That is exactly what happens. Appetent suddenly finds himself swinging into the gaping maw of the flowers that belong to this carnivorous plant. But in that moment, Mush Mush is able to channel into the rock and the roots and inform the plant that we are in fact friendly, and thus the plant retracts its hostile intent. Unfortunately, this means that both Hickory and Appetent are now free-falling through space, but Appetent is able to reclaim his Vajra, and both of them are able to slam their weapons into the wall, preventing their downward fall. Lulu then begins her descent via a clearly marked path, which they probably all could have seen before, and Mush Mush decides to web Hickory's lower portion and fling it over the edge. What results is a mad scramble down the rock face, and everybody being fortunate enough not to be hit by Hickory's falling torso. Through coordinated effort, both Appetent and Hickory are able to lower themselves to the bottom and safety. As Lulu and Hickory check in with each other over the mayhem of the last few moments, down comes Hickory's lower half and slams into the ground right beside them. Because of this, Hickory does take some serious damage to his lower portion, but nothing that isn't recoverable with some short rest. As our heroes breathe deep and ease back into Sanctuary, this is what we discover about the terrain about us. Upon this natural terrace, the stone is different, older, with ancient tool marks and dry water channels that predate anything in the Halcyon domain. Most remarkably, this alcove seems untouched by corruption. Small, healthy ferns grow from the cracks, their vibrant green shocking after the sickly vegetation above, and the air tastes cleaner, though weighted with great age. So as we explore this little ledge, Mush Mush is able to tap into the roots and discover that there's something magical hidden behind some rock work here. Lulu also feels the presence of magic, and with the help of Absinthe, they are able to successfully move a portion of this wall and discover that there is treasure behind it. So you can see how I've built that into the mark here. Appetent is sent crawling into the little space, and while in there he discovers all the treasure that is available. Items that will prove very useful for us indeed. The little cache we find consists of a pre-apostasy climbing harness, which prevents all fall damage up to 30 feet, which is really cool. We also get some ancient rope coil, which is 50 feet long and is incredibly strong and durable. We get some provisions, which are these little rations which will help sustain us even though they are very small. Think of like the lambus bread from Lord of the Rings. And then we also find a stone tablet with an inscription that says, "For those who descend seeking truth rather than treasure, the forgotten remember their faithful servants." So we're all looking pretty good and feeling okay after our harrowing descent down that first 30 feet into the Shalk Chasm. Now we see that there is further yet to go. And as I begin to build this second mark here, I'm going to read for you some of what we go through on our way down to this ledge. I will quickly note that, for our game session, I had built just these 7 doors. I only had like a couple hours to do it, and that was kind of a good challenge, and so I wanted to just leave them up here the way that I had created them during that period of time. And then afterwards I came and filled out the rest of the scene, so that's what I'm going to be doing right now. So as I put down that brickwork, I'm going to read for you what we see. The final descent to the temple looms below us, 40 feet of treacherous wall that weeps with wrongness. What seeps from the ancient stone isn't water, it's something thicker, warmer, that glows with a sickly blue phosphorescence. The liquid traces lazy paths down the rock face in patterns that seem almost deliberate, pooling in natural basins before overflowing in slow, hypnotic cascades. The air here tastes of copper and ozone, with an underlying sweetness that makes our teeth ache. This is not a barrier we can avoid. The temple entrance lies directly below, and this weeping wall is the only path down. So at this point we all had the option to decide how we would descend, either very quickly, which mean more recklessly, or slowly and carefully, which would mean less exposure, but there was just no way to avoid being exposed to this liquid. So Hickory decided to go down as fast as possible, and the rest of us sort of more moderately, but we had to make checks along the way, rolling to see if we would keep that pace or not and how much exposure we had to this liquid. So by the time we all get to the bottom, we've had some exposure, all of us. Lulu is kind of disoriented because she got heavily exposed at some point, but then what we discover is that it's actually not a bad thing to be exposed to this liquid, because all of us received visions therefrom, visions that would impact our specific storyline. So that was very cool and well written by our GM, for sure. So as we all reach the bottom and then just kind of collect ourselves, we discover this final scene opening up before us. The last traces of temporal liquid fade from our vision. The final obstacle reveals itself. The last 10 feet of descent brings us to worked stone, not the rough-hewn walls of the recent sinkhole, but ancient masonry that speaks of civilizations lost to time. 7 arched doorways stretch across the ancient temple facade, each sealed with different materials that pulse with dormant power. This architecture predates even the God King's era. These stones were laid when the gods still walked among mortals, when divine and mortal realms touched without fear or corruption. Above the doors, inscriptions in multiple scripts spiral around 7 distinct divine symbols. The newest layer, in Old Halcyon, reads, 7 seals for 7 sorrows. 7 keys for 7 tears. Only in proper sequence may the faithful draw near. Speak not the names that were forbidden, sing not the songs that were erased, but offer what each domain requires, and the way shall be embraced. But it's the older script, worn almost smooth, that catches our eyes. Here begins the covenant of crowns. Here mortal become more than mortal. Here the age of glory was born. Okay, so that'll conclude this mock. I think the pops of color with those blue plum pieces worked out pretty well. And yeah, happy with the wall and the tile work too. So the 7 doors from left to right are as follows. First there is the crystal door, then a stone door, then a metal door, a bone door, a wood door, a shadow door, and a rain door. So we had to figure out the correct sequence here, and after some careful deliberation amongst ourselves and observing the environment and making all kinds of checks and rolls, we think we got it figured out. And so we begin with the metal door. And the inscription above it reads, "They remembered their covenant with mortals." So we had to each tap into a memory that we had in order to get this door to glow and open. And that was successful after some few attempts. Then we moved on to the stone door, above which reads, "They honored those who came before." And to open this door, we each had to speak the name of someone lost and why they mattered to us. Next came the wooden door, and above that it read, "They maintain natural order through change." This opened automatically with Wishmush standing before it. The root friendship offering allowed for success, and the wood straightened and created a passage. Next we had to open the shadow door, and above that door it read, "They forged sacred trust between divine and mortal." And in order for this to work, someone had to confess darkness while trusting the companion's acceptance. And so Lulu confessed one of her greatest failures to the party, and that worked, and the door opened. Then we moved on to the bone door, and above the bone door it said, "They sealed the pact in solemn ceremony." In order for this to happen, we had to maintain 3 minutes of perfect silence. And that meant everyone in the party had to remain silent for 3 minutes, which we managed to do. It was a long 3 minutes, but hey, we did it. And then we moved on to the rain door, and above the rain door it said, "They blessed the chosen with divine grace." Now, because Appetent worships the god of rain, we allowed him to go forward first, and what he had to do was speak the first 5 hints in the correct chronological order, which he managed to do, almost slipping up, but fortunately that did not happen, and the rain door opened, and then we were on to the final crystal door. Above the crystal door, it said, "They chose this moment to change everything forever." And in order to open this door, we had to all work together in synchronicity. We had to count down in different paces until we reached 0, and this was a really cool challenge that we had to do together. But once we did it, it worked wonderfully. We've achieved our goal, and we're hoping for great success, but instead something quite unpredictable happened. As our synchronized voices reach 0 in perfect temporal harmony, the crystal door shimmers open and all 7 doors swing wide with a sound like cathedral bells tolling underwater. But our mastery of time's flow has done more than unlock a passage. It has destabilized something far more dangerous. The air itself begins to shimmer and fracture, reality bending as if seen through broken glass. What should have been a simple unlocking mechanism has been corrupted by a century of Umbra taint. And our demonstration of temporal control has triggered something ancient and hungry. The corrupted magic recognizes our manipulation of time as both opportunity and threat. This isn't how the doors were meant to open. The Umbra has twisted their original purpose into something predatory. Appetent's divine nature makes him a lightning rod for the wild temporal energy. Mushmush's symbiotic network suddenly pulse with temporal echoes from across centuries. The magic doesn't choose them, it simply takes them. We've proven that we can manipulate time, and now time manipulates us in return. The last thing that Appetent and Mushmush see is Hickory and Lulu reaching desperately toward them both, their faces filled with shock and horror as reality tears open like infected flesh. Then displacement. Not death, not destiny, but a chaotic tumble through fractured time itself. Mushmush and Appetent become victims of corruption that turned their success into a trap. So here the party is becoming separated, and this is really because some of our members are going away for some time, and so what's going to happen over the next coming weeks is that Lulu and Hickory will continue the adventure together, and we'll catch up with Mushmush and Appetent at a later point. Hickory and Lulu stand alone before the ancient temple's violated threshold. 7 doorways frame corridors that descend into darkness older than memory, and from somewhere in those depths, the desperate screams of Everdus and his hunters echo through halls that have not known footsteps for a century. The real adventure and the real horror waits below. So hey, that wraps this session, and thank you so much for watching and continuing along with this adventure. Join us next time as we continue on into the very depths of madness, it seems, and whatever else might wait there for us. I've been really enjoying these Daggerheart builds, but we'll see. Maybe I'll be doing something else here in the very near future, just to give a little bit of a break from all this. Alright, well, you all have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.